Are you ready to make yourself some fun and fuzzy hand warmers? Well, stick with me, Marley Bird, your by Crafty Bestie. I'll show you how. Let's go.
Show me love.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Marley Bird YouTube channel. And what do we have here? Marley, why do you keep showing us our hands? Well, that's because we are going to make thrummed mittens today. Knit thrummed mittens. You can obviously see there's a mitten or a fingerless mitten. The choice is yours. What makes these thrummed mittens? Well, I'm glad you asked. They make them thrums because you will knit the mitten along with unspun roving in specific stitches, and it makes it so that way when you put your hand inside of the mitten, it's like you're sticking your hand in a cloud. It is so incredibly soft, absolutely warm, and just a lot of fun to make. Now, I have made these fingerless mittens in years past, and I use them a lot when I am at track practice or during the track season, so that way I have my fingers free to, mess with my phone or take pictures. But if you're somebody who is cold all the time and you want to make sure you have warm mittens for when you're maybe scraping off the windshield on your car, or you're going sledding with your dogs, or you're going sledding with your kids or walking your dogs, these are going to be the ones you want. So why don't you go ahead, grab that pattern. It's in the video description box right down there below, and join me with your supplies, and we will get started making these fun mittens. Let's do this. Let's talk about the supplies for these thrummed mittens. Now, for the mittens that we will be making in the video, I have decided to use size 8 double pointed needles, which are a 5mm needle. I'm also going to use unspun roving from Knit Picks. This is the wool of the Andes roving, and I will be using the wool of the Andes bulky weight yarn. Another alternative you could use from the unspun roving is this yarn like roving right here, which is called Tough Puff. This yarn here is not spun very thick, and you can actually separate it apart and have it act as roving, just basic roving if you choose. Now, this is a little bit harder to use in my opinion. I would much rather use the unspun roving, but if you have this on hand, this is a great choice. Again, I would pair that with a wool of the Andes bulky weight yarn, or you could even do like a swish bulky if you wanted to. But this is what we are going to use for these mittens. Don't forget to get a good pair of scissors, tapestry needle, and some stitch markers if you have those on hand. We are going to begin by creating the cuff of our mitten. Now we will start off with a long tail cast on. So you want to make sure you have enough yarn to accommodate the number of stitches you're going to create with that long tail cast on. And those of you familiar with the Marley Bird website, you will know all about the no cuss cast on, which is the long tail cast on onto double pointed needles. I like to use a set of 5 double points because I feel as if you are less likely to get ladders in your work if you use multiple needles like this. You can see here I'm just doing a long tail cast on directly onto one of my knitting needles, 2, 4, 6, 7, and 8. You will put the number of stitches on each needle that is listed in the pattern. Once you get that first set of stitches on the first needle, you grab your second, and you're going to see you have this nice little ridge right here at the bottom of your stitches. Take your new needle, rest it right next to that ridge, just as if it's an extension of the first needle. Regrasp your yarn and continue your long tail cast on, working it onto the new needle. And that very first stitch, when you tighten it up, make sure that first stitch butts up real close to the last stitch. Okay, you don't want any sort of gaping. You don't want these stitches to be pulled out like that. You literally want to hold these needles together as snug as you can. And then you will continue on, placing the number of stitches you need on the second needle, just like so. And knitting is a creature of habit, so that we are going to grab another knitting needle and just like before, rest it right up against the ridge from the needle you finished. Okay, so now it's an extension of the second needle. You can see I'm holding all the needles just like so. Readjust my yarn, cast onto the new needle, and when I come down here, I make sure that I make that first stitch nice and snug to that last stitch on needle 2. And I continue on casting on the stitches I need on this needle. I think I had one too many there. Let me count. 2, 4, 6, 8. Yep. All right, last needle. Grab my fourth one, place it right next to that third one, extend it up. Again, I regrab all my needles. Make sure my first one is right next to that last one from needle 3 and continue. Okay, so I have all the stitches I need and I have this really long tail that I will deal with in a minute. I'm not going to pay any attention to the tail. What I want to do now is I want to position these needles so that way I can begin to work in the round. So here is what I like to do. I will take these needles, they're in my right hand, and I'm going to rest them down flat onto the table, and they're going to be horizontal just like so. Ultimately, when we work in the round, we want the very first stitch we cast on to meet up with the very last stitch we cast on. So we have to adjust these needles that are in a straight line right now so that they can form a circle or a square with that very first stitch meeting up with the last. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to hang on to that last needle that you worked with. Hang on to it so it doesn't go anywhere. And these 3 needles right here, we're going to rotate them. So instead of going this way, they're going to go up and down. So we're going counterclockwise. So I'm going to rotate them, letting this needle go on top of this one. So I'm rotating them counterclockwise. And they went up. Okay, let's scooch these over just so I have some room. Now, this needle is where I want it, and this needle here is where I want it. So I'm going to hold that needle, and these 2 here, I'm going to rotate again counterclockwise, making sure that they go one on top of the other, right? This one went on top of this one. You see that? Okay. Now this needle is where I want it, so I'm going to hold it, and this very last one with the very first stitch we cast on is going to get rotated counterclockwise. And as it comes down here, let me move this yarn. As it comes down here, voila, we now have a nice circle, or actually it's a square because we have our 4 needles, right? But our very first stitch is meeting, so our first stitch is meeting up with our last stitch. And now we will use our 5th needle to work into that first stitch and work it with the yarn coming off the stitch at the end. Now, just like when we would join a new needle and our very first stitch needed to butt up real close to the last stitch we did, we need that to happen right here as well when we do this join. So I'm going to rotate these needles ever so slightly, just so it kind of looks like it's a diamond in front of me, okay? Because I am right-handed, I knit with the yarn in my left hand. This works either way, but I want to show you how I'm going to do this. Now, I know if you are new to double points, you might be afraid that these stitches are going to fall off. And if you did a cast on, nice and snug, they aren't going to fall off at all. They're going to just hold their place. But I'm just pushing them so that they're in the center of the needles, with the exception of this one, which is the one I'm going to be knitting off of. So I need those stitches to be closer to the tip. Now, I don't need to do anything with this one, right? All that's going to happen with that one is this yarn is going to come from that last stitch there. No big deal. So if I hold my needles, I'm keeping them on the table at this point in time just to try and make this as easy as possible. But keeping it on the table, you're going to take this needle and you're going to go into that first stitch you cast on just as if to knit. So we're going to go in as if to knit, just like you normally would. And now we're going to knit the stitch. So just yarn over your needle with the yarn that's attached to this needle over here. So it's yarn over, just like you normally would, and pop out. Completely ignore the other needles. Pay no attention to them. So now I've literally put my needle into that, taken the yarn and yarned over my needle just like I normally would to knit, and then I popped that stitch back out. So now I have the stitch is waiting for me on my what is now my right hand needle. So all I need to do now is have this first stitch here that I went into, have it jump off, right? So when I do that, it jumps off. All I want to do now is my yarn, my working yarn here, I want to tug on it, which is going to tighten the stitch that's on this needle. And I'm going to wiggle this needle a little bit just to really tighten that stitch up. So now the stitch on my new needle is butting up really nice and close to the last stitch on that needle, just like we did when we were doing our cast on, okay? And here's the thing. We can make that first stitch nice and snug, but if we don't also make the second stitch nice and snug, it's going to go away. So because we're doing a knit one, purl one ribbing, I'm going to go ahead, bring my yarn between my needles to the front, go into the next stitch as if to purl, right? I'm completely ignoring the other needles, guys. This is just knitting with 2 needles. That's all we're using here. I'm going to purl this stitch and jump off. Again, I'm going to pull my yarn and give a nice little tug on my right hand needle, and now I'm good. So I bring my yarn back to the back. I have my 2 stitches here. You can see the last stitch on that needle, butts up really close to the first stitch on that needle, and I'm ready to carry on just in my knit one, purl one ribbing. Now that these 2 stitches are tight, you can see that the very first stitch we did is nice and close to that last stitch from the very last needle we did. And now this one is nice and close to that one. So we can now carry on with our knit one, purl one ribbing. Again, completely ignoring the other needles. They are literally just holding stitches. They aren't going to do anything else, okay? I'm just knitting 1 stitch, bring my yarn between my needles, and purl the next stitch. Bring my yarn between the needles, knit a stitch, yarn between my needles, and purl a stitch. When you get to the end of the needle, you're going to have a spare needle, right? So now all my stitches are on my right hand needle. And what I'm going to do, so I just finished this, right? So as I'm holding it, I'm going to rotate, right? So I want to, if I just finished all these, I want to get over to that needle, right? So I'm going to rotate in my hand, push those up so that they're on the center of the needle, rotated my hand. So now I'm to the stitch that was to the left of the one I just finished. Notice I'm pulling this yarn nice and snug, and that's the yarn that's attached to the stitch that I just finished. So when I knit this first stitch, because I just finished with a purl, so I'm going to start with a knit, again, I'm going to pull the first 2 stitches nice and snug. So I go into the first stitch, I knit it, I jump off, I pull the yarn, and I wiggle my needle. You should be able to let go of your needle. It should just stay in place. That's when you know you've done a good job. Okay, now I'm going to purl the next one. Again, I'm going to make sure it is also nice and snug. Okay, this one is going to keep this one in check. You can think of this is Batman and this is Robin. Okay, you got to have a partner. So this is Marley Bird and this is Robin. This is what Superman and this is Wonder Woman. I have no idea. Lois Lane. You want these partnered pairs. You want them to be snug, and you also want to make sure that the first stitch on the new needle always butts up nice and close to the last stitch on the previous needle. If you do that, you will not get any ladders in your work now and throughout. So this holds true not only as we're doing the ribbing here, but it will hold true as we transition into the body of our mitten. Okay, so I'm going to continue on here. I put my spare needle over and then Notice I moved the stitches to the middle of my needle. I rotate so that I'm to the next needle over to the left of what I just finished. I kind of push that needle down so that I have the stitches ready to go, and I do it all over again. So I knit the first one, nice and snug. Let me get myself some yarn here, and then I purl the next one. Again, I make sure it's nice and snug. You see that? All right, and then I just continue with my ribbing. You will keep doing this all the way around all 4 needles. You'll know you're back to the start because you'll get back to where your tail is. And when you get back to the start, there might be a little bit of a gap between the needle, the last needle on this round and the first needle that we started with. There might be a little gap. Don't stress about it. We can absolutely clean that up with our tail. And it is something that will close eventually if you continue to work these stitches just like I'm telling you to keep those partnered pairs. Okay, make sure you work Batman and Robin nice and tight so that way they keep each other in check, and then you can knit the rest of the stitches on that needle just as normal. You don't have to worry about them being super tight at all. It's just the first 2. I'm to the end of my round. Let's see if mine are separated apart. So you can see here, they're a little further apart than where we started, but they are not bad at all. And what will happen is I have this tail here that I can use to close up any gap when I go to weave in the tail. So I'm not stressing about it. Plus, as we get past this first round, which is always the hardest round, no matter if you're knitting or purling, it's going to get tighter and tighter and tighter. It's going to fill out really nice. So I just continue on, knit my first stitch, nice and snug, purl my next one, nice and snug. So Batman and Robin are snug, and then I continue on, okay? If you are not sure which is the right side or the wrong side, there's a couple things we can do here. We can put a marker on the right side of our fabric now. And if you put the marker on the right side of your fabric right here on your needle number 1, it's the first needle of your round, it will also tell you that is the first needle of your round, okay? Because as we are knitting, we want our stitches to flow down the bottom of our needles. They want to flow down the bottom of our needles. We should not be knitting like this, okay, with the needles away from us and then our stitches over here. We should always be knitting whereas if our needles that we're working with are over here and the ones that are on hold are out there, okay? If you do it the opposite way, you're going to be knitting inside out. So we always want to be, essentially, if I were knitting flat, it'd be knitting just like this. Okay, I want to always be knitting like this. I don't want to be knitting like this if I were knitting flat. Okay, I don't want to be knitting with my work over there. I want my work over here. Okay, I want my work over here. So this outside portion that is getting work, that is a result of the stitches we're making, this is the right side of our work. This is the public side of our work. So like I said, if we wanted to add a marker here, we could add it right here to our needle number 1, which would give us a clue of, hey, this is the start of your round. And if you put the marker, this is a removable marker, if you put it on the outside here, you'll also know that this is also the right side of your fabric. So if ever all of a sudden you're knitting along and the right side of your fabric is on the inside of your work, you'll know something is wrong, okay? We want this to be just like so. We always want our fabric going, on the outside of the work because we're working in the round. And we're just going to continue. Now you can make your cuff as short or as long as you want. You could even make it extra long and double it up like a double cuff if that's something you're interested in. But go ahead, follow along with the pattern as written. Make the cuff as long as you wish. Just make sure it's nice and snug. Keep those stitches nice and tight as you transition from one needle to the next, okay? Keep Batman and Robin both nice and tight, and you will have some immediate success. Finish your cuff, join me back here, and we'll move on to the body of our mitten, where we will also begin to introduce our thrums. I have reached the last row of my ribbing. You can see it's just a small little ribbing here, and I'm ready to move on to the setup round for my body, which is an increase round. So we're going to keep this very easy. We will work in stockinette stitch in the round, which means we will just be knitting. So you will knit to the end of your needle, and when you get to that last stitch on your needle, you are actually going to now work a make one. So you're going to go into that yarn strand between the stitch that's on your next needle and the stitch you just finished. You're going to pick up that strand, and we are going to knit that strand through the leg that's the hardest to get into. So I'm just going to go into the back leg of that stitch and knit it. Okay, so if you change the number of stitches on each of your needles, you will have to make an adjustment on your end, but the pattern is written so that you just work in stockinette stitch until you get to that end of the needle, and then we will work that make one. So I'm down to the end. I'm going to lift up. I'm going to lift up that strand. Can you see that? Just lifting up that strand. It's between the needle that I'm going to move to and the needle I just finished. And then I knit this through the leg that's the hardest to get into. So on this one, you can see I went behind the work and I picked it up like so. And when I do that, it makes it so that the leg that's in front is actually behind the leg that's in back. So if you pick it up like that, you're going to knit it through the leg that's in front. If we pick it up from the front and scoop it up like so, now you can see the leg that's in front is ahead of the one in back. If you do that, you're going to knit through the back leg. Okay, so let's pick that up. Like right here, I would knit through the back leg. I'm trying to make it so you can see without that needle in the way. And then just knit. Okay, this is just a generic make one. That's all we're doing. So we are increasing our stitches by 1 at the end of each of our needles, which will result in a stitch increase of 4 overall, right? So right here, I scoop up that strand right there that's between. See, I scooped it up, and that front leg is forward, so I'm going to knit it through the back leg. So I come here, I go into the back leg, and I just knit it. Last one. We'll knit over the end of this needle. Again, scoop up. This one, the front leg is forward, so I'll knit it to the back leg. And off. It doesn't matter if you're knitting to the front leg or back leg as far as, you know, which one is the harder one to get into, as long as you're going into the one that's the hardest to get into. That's to make sure you don't get a hole. All right, so now we are in stockinette stitch. So what we will do now is begin the Thrummed Mitten pattern, and the first 2 rounds are just knit. So we're going to knit 2 rounds to begin with, just even, no increases. And begin our thrumming. So we're actually going to take this and we're going to set it aside. So put that aside, and we are going to pull out your roving. Now roving can come in many different forms. Either you can follow along with the knit picks like this, where it's roving that is not like twisted up in a hank or anything, or in a skein. It's just displayed, like it's just folded just like so. Now, as I set this down, what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to untie the 2 ends. So they had the ends over here tied. And when it comes to roving, we do not want to use our scissors on it, okay? Anytime we can avoid using our scissors on it, that is the best, because we want to pull this apart, sort of like cotton candy. So I'm going to pull up just a little bit here, okay? And when we do our thrums, we want them to be about 3 inches, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just separate out a little bit, and I want the thickness here of what I'm separating out. This is going to be the thickness of my thrum as it goes through my my knitting. So you don't want it super thick. And this is one of those, like, you're gonna find what feels good to you. And to me, it's about, see, it's about like so. I mean, I would say that this is probably as wide as my size 5mm needle. Like if I hold it, okay, it's about as wide as my 5mm needle. And I am just going to take this length that's as wide as my 5mm needle. And I'm going to come down here. And when I get to a point where I have just a pretty good bit here, I can just separate your hands far enough apart that when you pull, the fibers will extend apart and they just separate. Can you see that? How they just separate? Okay. So now what will happen, I can kind of scoot this aside. And this here, this is going to become bits of thrum. Okay, now you can create all your thrum at the start. You can create them as you go. I will leave that completely up to you. Okay, but this is how we're going to do it. You can take your yarn here, take your roving, and you're going to just kind of space it out about 3 inches or so, and then separate. You'll see right here, I can't separate because I'm still holding on to the fibers too close. But if I come down further, it becomes way easier to separate. So I get a length of roving that's about 3 inches or so. And what I like to do is I take one end and I fold it into the middle, and I take the other end and I will fold it into the middle like a bow. You see that? Like a bow. And then I will rub the fibers together here in the middle. And it's at that middle point here. This middle point is what I'm actually going to knit with. Okay, it's that middle point. Now, I also have seen some thrummed patterns where they will actually leave the ends out big like this. They won't fold them in. They will just take this, fold this around their needle just like that, and leave those nice and long on the inside of your mitten. You can totally do that if you want. I prefer this method because once this is around your needle, that folded bow bit, that's what's inside of your mitten, and I think it just fits a lot better. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and create some thrums here so that way we can put them on our mitten stitches as we work around. Now, I wrote this pattern so that we have the thrums separated out and we can kind of do them so that we get kind of a checkerboard look with all the thrums as we go from one round of thrumming to the next round. As I'm talking here, I'm also going to mention you want this section here to be nice and big. You don't want that to be too small. Don't think to yourself, oh, my hands are going to get caught if I make this too big in my mitten when I put my hands in. That's not the case. You want these big and fluffy. That's what's really going to make your mitten really cozy. Okay. And you can see here, I just keep pulling from that one little bit that we took. And we're going to just put this together. Anyways, like I was saying, when we add our thrumming, because we do not add thrums every single round, but when we add our thrumming, we're going to stagger them in like a checkerboard effect. So that way they aren't just stacked on top of each other like stripes. They're going to be staggered a bit. And then here is like the last bit of that section I took out. And here we go. Let's keep going. You can see here where doing all these beforehand can be, really beneficial. And at the same time, it can be very, very boring and very tiring. So I kind of like to make them as I go. In the past, I've talked about making them beforehand. I guess it's all about, how are you feeling in the moment? So if you're thinking to yourself, I want to make them beforehand and maybe put them in a Ziploc so I can use them as I go, that is possible. Or you can do them just like this and do them as you're working. Now, I'm also going to show you, so here are some thrums that I've made of a multicolored yarn and this is, or not yarn, but roving. This roving came in a very big, bright coloring. So it was this, but it was all the different colors. So when I pulled big sections off, there were all sorts of different colors. And what's fun about this is you put it in your Ziploc if you make a whole bunch beforehand, and you can just either selectively pick which colors you want to use to have a certain pattern. You can keep it very rainbow-like. You can have it be very sporadic by just not paying attention to what color you pick and just put your hand in and grab one. But this is what it would look like if you made a whole bunch beforehand that you could just grab and keep going with, okay? All right, so we have a few here, and let's go ahead and get these added to our actual work here and show you how to get that thrumming going. Oh, you're gonna just love this. This is so cool. Now that we have our thrums ready to go, we can get started by adding them to our work. Now, there are several different ways you can add thrums to a mitten, but I'm going to show you the method that I used in the pattern. You're going to grab the thrum that you made and fold it in half, and we're going to place that middle part onto your right hand needle. Now you can see here, I hold the tails of the thrum, okay? I hold them, I'm going to call those like the butterfly end, all right? Now we have the thrum on our right hand needle, but now we also have to go ahead and knit that stitch just like we normally would. So I'm going to yarn over my right hand needle, and now I'm going to pull through the yarn over and the thrum. So I pull through the yarn over and the thrum through that stitch and off. What you'll notice is you have that new stitch with the yarn is to the left of the roving, okay, of the thrum. It's the left of the thrum, okay? That's important. You want to make sure that that yarn is always to the left of the thrum. And then we move on to the next. So I go in, grab another one, fold it in half, put the center bit onto my right hand needle, okay, yarn over, pull through the stitch and the thrum so that the stitch is to the left of the thrum and off. You keep going. So you're still maintaining your stitches as you transition from one to the next. You keep these nice and snug. So your Batman and Robin here, it's going to be 2 knits, right? So let's see, we did that. So 1, 2, keep that nice and snug. And that one snug. And then we're going to add our next thrum. So I pull this up, fold it in half, and put it around my right hand needle. Yarn over, pull the yarn over and the thrum through the stitch, and make sure that the yarn over, or the stitch, that's what it is the stitch is to the left of your thrum roving, and then continue on. Again, keep these nice and snug. This one's going to be another thrum, so I put my needle in. So not only is this one going to be a thrum, but it's my robin stitch, right? So I also have to make sure I'm knitting it nice and snug. So I go in and I give that a nice snug pull. But again, my yarn there, it's to the left of my roving. Finish my round. So I know it's the end of my round because I do have that tail, but I also have my marker still in place there, okay? So we've added all these little bits of fluff, and it's like, well, what do we do? So first off, you have all this fluff. This is going to stay on the inside of your mitten. This is what's going to make the inside of your mitten so nice and soft, all right? So you can kind of just push the fluff down into there. This will also help you make sure you're always working to the right side of your work, right? Because the fluff will always be on the inside. Now, if you remember, I said that you do not add thrumming to every single round, okay? You do it as written in the pattern. But after you do your thrumming round, the following round, it's important that we knit together the thrum and the stitch that's to the left of the thrum. We want to knit those together and we want them to twist. So we're going to knit them through the back leg. So I will knit that first stitch just as normal. And this second stitch, I want to knit the thrum and the stitch through the back leg. And when I do that, it's going to make the thrum be more forward or in front of that stitch, and it's also going to twist the stitch to make it a little tight. So I go into the thrum and the stitch, and I go into the back leg. You see that? And then I just knit it. So I yarn over my right hand needle, pull that through and off. You can see that results in the thrum looking like a little knit stitch. So then I just carry on. So I will knit over to wherever my next thrum is. And when I get to it, I know that I'm going to be knitting it with the stitch that is to the left of it, right? I'm going to knit it to the left of it because we made sure that we did that all the way through. And I'm going to knit it through the back leg so that it twists and so that the thrum is on top of that stitch, the yarn. Okay? Do your best to not split the roving, but it might happen and that's okay. You just keep going around like this. All the while, I'm making sure that my last stitch on this needle is nice and close to the first stitch on the next needle. Okay, it's very important you do that. Otherwise, you're going to get ladders, and you don't want ladders. All right, this one, see how the yarn's a little bit on top of that roving? So I'm going to move it over so that it's literally to the left of it. And now I'm going to knit it through the back leg. Just because I want that roving to be dominant. I want it to be forward. And now I finish the stitches. So I have finished my round that completes the thrumming, and you can see my thrum stitches look like actual stitches, right? Isn't that cool? All right, so now I'm going to work the number of rounds written in the pattern in plain stockinette. What does that mean? Well, we are working in the round, and if we want to keep these as knit stitches, we just are going to knit. So I want you to knit the number of rounds written in your pattern until it's time to add thrums again. And when you add thrums next time, we will actually be adding them between the two thrums here. So there's 5 stitches between this thrum and this one. We're going to add it to the third one. So we're going to get a checkerboard type look. So let's go ahead and get to that next thrum round. I know I want a thrum in between these two, and I have 5 stitches between here, so I'm going to put it into the third one, right? So let's go ahead. Again, making sure those two are nice and snug. We're going to get over, this is the third one. So I go in, grab my thrum and wrap it around the needle, right? Wrap it around the needle, yarn over, pull through that stitch and the thrum and off. Okay, when we come back on that next round, we'll knit those together through the back leg. And you continue on. This one, a thrum is going into the second stitch, so we want to make sure that it's not only thrummed, but this is our quote-unquote robin stitch, so it needs to also be nice and snug. So I have my thrum there, yarn over, pull up my stitch and my thrum, and I make sure that's nice and snug. And then I can carry on. And now we're going to do our finishing round for the thrum round. So we will knit over to where the thrum is. And when you get to where the thrum is, remember there's the stitch behind the thrum. You're going to knit those together through the back leg. So that way the thrum is forward and you continue on. And that's it, guys. This is how you're going to add the thrums throughout the mitten process, okay? Now, what's going to be cool here is that as you keep going and we increase with our thumb gusset, you will still be adding thrums to your thumb gusset because we want to make sure that, you know, all of those stitches have nice soft cushions of beautiful soft cloudness on the inside. So we will be adding thrums as we work along with our thumb gusset with our increases and such. So what I want you to do now is go ahead and get to the part of the pattern where it's time for you to begin increasing for that thumb gusset. I'm going to show you how we do those thumb gusset increases, how we keep track of them, and then of course adding those thrums to the thumb gusset as you go along. It's not very hard at all. I mean, it's no different than this. We're just going to be in a little bit different place, right? And making those extra stitches so that our thumb can fit in there. And then we'll be on our way, guys. You're going to be done with this in no time, I promise. You're like, this is so easy. This is so easy and so fun. Um, yeah, cool. Okay, get to where the thumb gusset instructions are ready for you to continue, and I will meet you for the thumb gusset. And here we are, ladies and gentlemen. It is time to start your thumb gusset. Now, the thumb gusset is where we're essentially making a pocket for where our thumb is going to come out of our mitten from the base. So you will notice that we are going to place our thumb gusset across the start of 3 stitches, but we're going to begin by working some increases. So following along with your pattern for where the placement of your thumb gusset should be, work over to where you are supposed to place a marker. And when you get to that point, let's go ahead and we're going to place a marker there. And now I'm also going to do a make one. So I'm going to scoop up that bar between the stitches, just like we did when we did an increase earlier. Notice I scooped it up from the front, which means that front leg is forward. I want it to be twisted, so I'm going to knit it through the back leg. This is precisely the same thing we're doing when we do our thrums. We're just knitting it through the back leg to twist that stitch. All right, so we've increased one. Now I want you to work across 3 stitches. And then we're going to increase another. So this one, let's go ahead. I'm going to scoop it from the back forward. So you can see that back leg is coming forward. So I would actually knit it through the front leg. So I come here to the front and knit it, and that twists the stitch. Okay. So if you want to place a marker here, this is where you will do that as well. Let me grab another marker here. And we're going to place a marker. Now go ahead and you're going to finish the rest of your round, which should just be knitting. This is the only thing you will do on this round, is work this increase. And you will also just work plainly on the following round. So let's complete this round and the next round, and then we will proceed to work another thrummed round. And when we do that thrummed round, we will be adding thrums to our thumb as well. Okay, I finished those 2 rounds, and now on this round, not only am I on a thrumming round, but I'm on another increase round right here for between my thumb gusset. Okay, so I have a couple things happening here. I'm going to work my thrums, maintaining the pattern I've been doing. But when I get to that first marker and I slip that marker, I'm going to work my increase. So I will do my increase. Now I'm going to work across 2 stitches, and it's in this stitch I'm supposed to do a thrum. So I will add my thrum right here, just like we've been doing all along, nothing special. Work across 2 stitches, and then do another increase. So this one I did the same thing. I scooped from the back, just trying to keep them consistent on each side. Work my increase, slip my marker, and now I want to continue on working my thrum pattern. Okay, so you will continue on maintaining your thrum pattern for the body of your mitten. So I know that I need to add one right here on this second one. Right, we have this pretty down pat at this point. Grab your thrum. Oops, make sure it's just over your right hand needle and pull that through, and then continue on. Hopefully at this point you're starting to get a little excited about how fluffy it is on the inside. Remember, the fluffier the better. You want to be able to put your hand in that mitten and let it be a little bit tight from the fluff, because the fluff will eventually sort of pat down some, and you want to make sure that the mitten is going to fit nice and snug with all of that fluff. Oh, I just love it. All right, I'm going to keep going until it's time for the next one. Grab and work the two together, and so on and so forth. So we will continue working in our pattern, increasing every other row at the thumb gusset and still maintaining your thrumming whenever it's, time to do your thrum. You want to make sure you're adding that thrum, whether it's to the body of your work or the thumb portion, okay? You can follow along with the written instructions or with your chart, totally up to you what you want to do, how you want to balance that out. But you want to continue on until all of those thumb gusset stitches have been created. And then I want you to meet me back here, and we're then going to put our thumb gusset stitches on a holder and continue on with the hand portion of our mitten and then the top of the mitten. So, I mean, you're nearly done. Can you believe it? You're nearly done. So I just finished my first thrum round, right? My thrum rounds. This is the second thrum round where I work my thrums through the back leg. Because I increase on the last round, I do not increase on this round. And if you're ever forgetful of whether you increased or not, take a look at your stitch and see if you can find that stitch that you created. It should look like a twisted stitch. Okay, so if you're ever uncertain, that's what you can do. Or you could always use row counters, or you could do little tick marks on your project or your pattern. Or if you want to follow along with the chart in Stitch Fiddle, you could use the tracking progressor, like the stitch tracker sort of thing. I don't know what it's called. I think it's called progress tracker. And you could follow along that way. But there's so many different ways you can keep track of where things are. But overall, you want to maintain the placement of your thrums and then increase every other round for that thumb gusset until you have the total number of stitches required for that portion of your project. And I will see you back here when you reach that number. Welcome back, everybody. Hopefully your project looks a little something like this. It's starting to really look full inside. And you've got this really nice thumb gusset section right there. What we are going to do now is we are going to take scrap yarn or this fantastic plastic tubing here. You could call this a stitch saver. It is amazing. This is linked in your pattern and you can get it directly from Amazon. But we're going to use this to put all of these stitches on hold. So let's get over to where these stitches are, and then we're going to use this rubber tubing to hold those stitches. We're going to cast on 3 stitches to make up for the original 3 stitches we had, and then we're going to continue working in the round. So following along with your pattern, you are on just a plain stockinette stitch round. So let's go ahead and get to where our markers are. So I will knit over to my marker. I'm no longer increasing, just so we're clear. I can remove my awesome Jafar marker right there. And now we're going to place the next series of stitches to my next marker on this tubing. Well, how do you do that, Marley? Okay, I'm going to take this tubing here. You can see there's a hole in the middle of it, and I'm going to smush it really snug like onto my knitting needle. I don't want this to come off right away, okay? So it's really snug onto the tip of my knitting needle. Now I'm going to just transfer all of those stitches off of my knitting needle directly onto the plastic tubing, okay? When I get over here to where my marker is, grab the tubing, pull it off of my needle, and just pull it through those stitches so that the ends don't come out. And now they're just holding those stitches. I can remove my other marker right here, which is Cruella de Vil inspired, and I'm ready to carry on. So it's at this point, these 2 needles are going to come together, and then these are on a holder. That's going to be my thumb. But as I bring these together, I also want to cast on 3 stitches. So we're just going to use a backwards loop cast on, which is very simple. You just loop the yarn around, let's see, how am I going to show this to you? Loop the yarn around your thumb and just grab it and put it on. So 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so 3 stitches. That will replace the original 3 stitches that we had between our increases. Okay, they were the original 3 stitches down here that were between our increases. So that's going to put those back in play. And then now we're going to continue on working these stitches over here that are on the other side of where these are, right? So we're going to knit that first one. Again, pull it really nice and snug because these are going to come loose a little bit, but we just want to do our best to give it a nice, good, snug tug as we're working around. And then now we're back to, again, we have our 4 needles and we should be back to our original stitch count after we did our increase after the ribbing. So for me, that is 36 stitches. So I'm back to my 36 stitches, or you can think of it, for me, I had 9 stitches on each needle. So I can now continue on finishing this round, which is just a plain knit round. And I have one more plain knit round before I do another thrum round. And then I just continue on in pattern, you know, working my next thrum round and then doing my second thrum round and then 2 plain rounds and so on and so forth. And I will do that until my mitten reaches the distance written in the pattern for the size I'm making. It's at that point we will begin to work decreases in the round for the top of the mitten, okay? So what you will be working on here as we just work round and around and around, we're gonna work the body of our mitten as it covers right here, the top of our hand, the top of our fingers, and we wanna get all the way up here until we get to where the top of our mitten is, or the crown of our mitten, if you will. I wanted to make sure I got back here to where these cast on stitches are, because I'm going to come over to them and here's that stitch, and it's a very, very flimsy stitch. Okay. So I want to make sure we want to knit this stitch. You see how it's twisted? I don't know if you can see how the front leg is like twisted up and over that back. Like this here is in front of this here. I want to really make that twisted. So I'm going to knit it right there. I'm going to knit it through that one. I'm going to knit that one and make it real nice and tight. Again, see how loose that gets? So I'm going to come over here and knit it through. It's the one that's the tougher one to get into. Knit it through that. And we're going to do it one more time. Let me give myself some slack here. And that is our 3rd stitch. This gets a little tricky here. Make sure you're just patient with yourself. So now we have those 3 stitches and we just keep going. Okay. So I know you know what to do at this point. This is like we're in the home stretch here, because we've done all the really intense work. You know, we've done the casting on, we've done the ribbing, we did an increase, we've started to do our thrumming. You learned how to do thrumming, then you did increases for the thumb gusset, then you put those stitches on hold. I mean, we've done a lot of stuff so far, and there's just a little bit more to go for this piece to work. Once we get the body of the mitten done, we will work on the top of the mitten, which will cover the top of our fingers. Or if you wanted to make this a fingerless mitt, you could do that at that time. And then we will come back and we will deal with all these stitches that we put on a holder here. So that way we can have a thumb on our mitten, right? So let's go ahead, continue on, and I will see you once you reach the point of the mitten for the mitten top. Are you getting excited for those mittens? I'm sure you have already had your hand in there and felt how warm they are, and you're ready to bring this on home. So let's go ahead, take a look at the mitten that I am working on, and let's work those decreases for the top of the mitten. Let's go. Well, what do we have here? We have a partially complete mitten. I am so excited to make this finished. It is just the cutest mitten. Now, we're going to work these decreases around our work here. And depending on how long your top of your hand is or what round you finished on, that will determine where you are going to work your decreases. But essentially, this first round of decreases, every time you come to where there's a thrum, you're going to work an SSK where the thrum and the next stitch over. So those will be an SSK. And then you'll knit 2 stitches, and then you will knit 2 together. Okay, so depending on where you are, that's what we're going to end up doing. So for me, I ended with the thrum position over here. Okay, so I am going to start off with just my basic knit 2. And then, like I said, so the 2 stitches before my thrum, I'm going to knit 2 together. And then my thrum and the stitch next to it, I'm going to do an SSK. So I slip one as if to knit, slip one as if to knit, take my left hand needle, put it in the front leg of those 2 stitches and knit them together. Now, those of you out there who are like, oh, why don't I just do a knit 2 together through the back leg? You could do that. It's going to look slightly different. I prefer SSKs, but you can literally do whatever works best for you. Now I'm getting to the end of my needle here and I have 1 stitch and it needs to be decreased with the next stitch over there. So all I'm going to do is move that stitch over to the other needle. So that way now I can work my knit 2 together with my stitches on one needle and have no problem. Okay. And then this is where I'm going to do my SSK. So I slip as if to knit, slip as if to knit, and then knit these 2 together. So I put my left hand needle into the front leg and then knit them together. Then I will knit 2 and so on and so forth. So I keep doing this all the way around. And once I finish this decrease round, I then will work 1 round even. What does that mean? That means I'm just going to knit around just like we've been doing before. Okay. It's just our basic knit round. Okay. After we do that, we will then have another thrum round and a decrease round at the same time. So we will work all of that together. So let's see here. I'm going to work on mine. You work on yours. Let's finish this round. And I finish with my SSK here. That brings me to the end of my round. So now I will just knit 1 round even. Okay, 1 round even. I have finished my even round and I'm ready to do my thrumming round and a decrease round. So I will go ahead, I will knit 1. This is where my thrum is going to go. So we're going to add my thrum just like I normally would. You guys know how to do this by this point, right? And now I'm to the next 2 stitches where I am going to work a knit 2 together. So I'm going to do a knit 2 together. Okay, you got that? You with me so far? So then I knit 1. This is where I add a thrum. Oops, oops, oops. There we go. And then I'm going to do a knit 2 together. Knit 1, add a thrum. These are the ones obviously are at the very top of your mitten, so you want them to be nice and soft and cushy, and a knit 2 together. Knit 1, oops, I split the yarn there. Knit 1, add my thrum. And a knit 2 together. Now, if you wanted to use an SSK there, you absolutely could. I mean, it's totally up to you. I chose a knit 2 together because I just thought it looked good, but I'd be equally fine doing an SSK. Do my thrum. 1 more needle to go. I start off with my SSK, knit 1, do my thrum. And then my knit 2 together to bring it on home. So That was a decrease round and a thrum round. The following round is our second thrum round. So we're going to work even, but when we come to our thrums, we want to make sure we knit those through the back leg, just like we've been doing all along. Okay, so nothing different here. I'm just going to work those through the back leg. Just keep popping around. Once you finish that even round, we're now going to work knit two togethers all the way around. Okay, so I'm going to do knit two togethers in every 2 stitches all the way around. And if you get to a part where you have 1 stitch on one needle and you need the partnering stitch on the other needle, again, just move the stitch over. Okay, and you should be good. Okay, so I've worked stitches all the way around. I have very few stitches left. If I wanted to do another round of decreases, I could, but I'm very comfortable with the number of stitches I have left here. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this off. So I will go ahead. I'm going to cut myself a nice length of the yarn for the tail. And this is where I will grab my bent tip tapestry needle and thread that tail right onto my needle. And this is how I like to finish off all of my mittens. You ready? I like to go in and I go into each one as if to knit. I go in as if to knit and I slip that off. Go in as if to knit. I slip that off. And then I will continue on. So I will pull these through. Okay. So do that all the way around. Once you have thread your yarn through all of your stitches, this is where you get to pull all of those together and close the top of your mitten. This is so satisfying. Just watch, give it a nice pull. And look at that. Look how great that is. So that will be the top of your mitten. You can take your tapestry needle. You can go around these stitches one more time if you want, but I like to just go ahead and I'm going to pop the needle down into the mitten. And we're going to mess with that later on. Okay, so we're going to go and weave in the tail on the inside later on. You see that? Look how great that looks. And by weaving it in on the inside, that will not come apart. Okay, we can also pull down some of our thrums here if we feel like they've popped up, or if you feel like you want to pull them out a little bit more, you could put your needles underneath and kind of pull out any of the, if maybe one of the legs is tucked in, you can kind of pull that out just like that. It happens. With us twisting those stitches, it's a very common thing. You can kind of pull those out and make it look like a V. It's totally up to you. You can do whatever you want. Okay. All right. So there is the mitten so far. Now we have the thumb to do. Are you ready for the thumb? We are nearly there, everybody. So let's go ahead, keep your yarn on hand because we're going to pick up all of these stitches that we have on this stitch saver, and then we're going to knit ourselves a nice little thumb. You do want to include thrums in your thumb, so make sure you have some of those made up. I will suggest that for the thrums on your thumb, make the butterfly or the inside part, the end of the thumb, just a little bit shorter because you want to make sure you can get your thumb in there. Okay, so let's go ahead, get your thrums ready, and we'll jump into the thumb. Okay, it's time to finish this thumb. But before we can do that, we've got to get all of these stitches back on our needles. Now, there's a couple things here I want to talk about before we put these stitches on. The first thing is, usually when you pick up stitches along here where we cast on stitches and put these stitches on, you will get a big old gap or a hole right here. And so we're going to do a couple little tricks to eliminate that gap the best we can. Okay. And what I mean here is you can see here, like from our stitch saver, where the stitch right here that is on our stitch saver, if I extend it out, that stitch, the yarn that goes from it, the strand is right there, and it connects to this big stitch up here. There's a big loop up there that's extended. So this strand right here that connects it, if I pull on that strand, it tightens up that stitch there. Okay, it tightens up that stitch, and it also tightens up the stitch over here. So it pulls out any slack. So we are actually going to pick up this strand and put that on our needle so that way we can go back and actually work it together with some of the stitches we have up here. Okay, so we're going to pick up essentially an extra stitch here at this corner and this corner. Okay, so let's start off. I have there's my strand right there. I'm going from behind. I'm going to pick it up from behind and come up. And then just like we did when we were putting all of these stitches on the tubing, I am going to pull the stitches through that tubing onto this needle. Okay. So here's how I'm going to do it. Let's pull this up just a little bit. I'm going to be very careful. So I have the extra strand on there that I picked up, and then I am going to pull, essentially, I'm going to try and do about half of the total number of stitches I have on here, put onto one needle. Okay, so I'm going to do a little bit more than half, whatever, just do a little bit of half. Okay. And then I'm going to pop that off. Make sure those are all on there. And I'm going to grab my second needle. We're going to end up using 4 needles for this part. 3 needles in play and 1 to knit onto. And we're going to pull all of these onto the new needle here. So everything is on needles, no longer on the stitch saver. You can see that, right? Pull my stitch saver off. But this is the other side of the thumb, right? So I want to pick up the strand here also. So if I were to pull up that strand, hopefully you can see if I pull that strand, it tightens the stitch up here and it also tightens that stitch there. So I am going to grab this needle and just scoop up that strand. I'm just scooping it up. Okay, so I've placed it on there. All right, so I have some stitches here, some stitches here. Now we have to deal with our stitches over here. Now, if you remember, we cast on 3 stitches. And if we look at our work like this, knowing that we cast on 3 stitches right here, right? We have a stitch right here. There is our knit column. Here's a stitch. Here's our knit column. Here's a stitch as our knit column. But when we turn our work this way, what we really have, so there was the stitch I cast on. This stitch is actually, half of it is over here. So if you think of it as this column here, okay, so I'm going to just put my needle right there. And then, so here's a stitch, and then you have half of it right here. And then there's a stitch, and then you have half of it right here, okay? And then you have half over here. So you're actually going to pick up 4 stitches here, okay? And we're going to pick that up and knit those stitches, all right? So I'm going to pick up and knit at the same time. So what you want to do is go ahead and grab your yarn and let's dive in. All right, here we go. So I have my working yarn here so that I can get in and pick up. So my first stitch I'm going to pick up is right out here outside of this column. So I'm going to go in to that column, wrap my yarn around my needle. Oops, it's a little tricky here. It's all real snug. And I'm going to pull that wrapped yarn that I just wrapped my needle with, pull it through. Now I've come over here to this next column. Okay, it's the one where it looks like the V's are pointing towards me. I just stick my needle right in there, yarn over, and pull up a loop. Go to the next one where it looks like the V's are pointing towards me. Go in, yarn over, pull up a loop. And then one more. This is the last one. See how it's like kind of spaced out, like they kind of get gappy. I go in here and I go into that column, yarn over, and pick up a loop. So I have 4 stitches. Okay, so I've increased stitches for what I initially had on my thumb, but now we're going to actually begin to get rid of stitches. Okay. Now we transition over here to our first set of stitches that we had on our holder, right? And we start off with that stitch that we picked up that was a bar. We're going to knit that stitch together with the first stitch of our thumb, but we want this stitch to be twisted because we don't want this big hole here. Can you see my finger through there? We don't want that. So we want to twist this. So I'm actually just going to pop it off and literally just twist it and put it back on. And can you see that I've just twisted that stitch to really eliminate that hole, and it just makes everything look so much better. Okay, so I literally just took it off and twisted it and put it back on. And now we're going to knit these two together. So go through the front leg of both of them and literally knit them together. And when you do that, don't forget to pull that very tight and make sure that stitch butts up right next to that stitch over there, just like we've been doing all along so that we don't get ladders. Okay, now we go ahead and we continue on around our thumb here. And this would be the first round of our plain even round, right? After the second thrum round, that's what we're doing here. And you could probably already guess that when we get over to the end of this next needle, we're going to do that decrease again. I'm going to remind you, make sure those are nice and snug and tight together. Okay, so come over here. And it's not this one we want twisted, it's that one there, the one that's on the cord, right? Or not the cord, the one that was between. So I'm literally I just twisted it. And then I'm going to put it on there with the stitch before it, and I'm going to knit those together. You could do an SSK if you wanted. I'm just going to do a knit two together. All right, so we've eliminated the extra gappy bit. Now let's go ahead and get some more yarn. We're at essentially the start of our round. Okay, we're at the start of our round. This will be another even knit round. So we aren't going to add any thrums. That's what I mean by that. So to continue on, we'll go ahead and just knit across these 4 stitches you picked up, and it will get a little bit loose because you have that tail. And we can use this tail to seam up any sort of a hole that we might get here and here at the join still. So no worries. Don't pull out your work thinking something's wrong if you have a little bit of a hole. It will close up, and we can do that with our tail. So I'm just knitting one full round without any decreases or any sort of shaping. And this would be the second round after my second thrumming round, which means the following round will be a thrum round. And I will continue in the thrumming pattern on the thumbs as close as I possibly can. And I do that until the thumb reaches the measurement listed in the pattern. It's at that point, we will make sure we end after a second thrumming round, and we will just do a round of knit two togethers all the way around and pull everything together like we did on the top of the mitten. So this will not take very long because, you know, it's just this little tiny thumb, but make sure you are paying attention to keeping all of your needles nice and tight together, and then maintain your thrumming the best you can as well. Okay, so here is a little tip. I went and I took stitch markers and I placed them in between where the thrums were before so that I could easily see where I could keep that checkerboard. And I do want to mention that because we picked up the extra stitch on this side, we have the thrum, it's going to kind of be a little bit between those two, but you don't want them between those two, right? You want it right there. So what we're going to do is when we come over to where our thrum is going to be, pick one or the other. Okay, you're just going to have an extra stitch on one side or the other. Nobody's ever going to know it's on the inside of your thumb. It's going to be just fine. Okay, so what I mean by that is we're going to come here and I'm going to knit over to where I want my thrum, and I want it right here. Okay, so I'm going to put it right here. Made my thrum. I've made these just a little bit smaller down here, just a little bit, not a lot, so that I give myself just a little bit of room in the thumb area. And that's it. Okay. So now, as I transition over here to the next needle, just like we've been doing all along, I can either count or, do whatever it is that works for you if you want to look at your pattern. But if I have this marker here, I know that, oh, that's where I'm going to be putting my thrum. It's actually right here. So, because this is where the thrum was before, I count 2 and it's always in that middle one, right? So I will do one more and voila, put my thrum right there and continue on. And when this is done, if I want to move my markers to where I know the next position will be, I can do that. They're just helpful. It's just helps me visually see where I'm supposed to put things. Because sometimes especially when I'm working with darker yarn like this, it's hard for me to see. But if I have a big old pink marker there, I can quickly see, that's where I'm supposed to put my thrum. So it's supposed to go right here. Wrap it around and continue on. So that is all I'm going to do here. And I finished my round. Now, if you wanted to decrease down 1 stitch there so that you could, have the same number of stitches between all your thrums, so on and so forth. If it's something that bothers you, you can do it, but you literally don't have to do it. All right, so now I do my second thrum round, which is the knit the thrum and the yarn together through the back leg and continue. You know exactly how to do this. You've been doing this through your whole mitten. The hardest part here, I think, is just making sure that you're keeping these stitches nice and snug to your needle. Don't forget to really give that wiggle and tug. Make sure you keep Batman and Robin nice and snug. And then I like to make sure that the yarn is to the left of that thrum. Just makes the thrum pop out a little bit better, but we know we can always go back and pull the leg of the thrum out if it's wanting to hide away a little bit into that stitch. And you just keep on going. So we're going to keep doing this until the thumb measures the distance in the pattern. And then it's at that point we will work a series of decreases to pull it all together once again. A very satisfying moment. Oh my gosh, it's so fun when you put them on and you see them coming to life. All right, it's time to do my decrease round right here so I can close that thumb up. And I am so excited. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to do knit 2 togethers all the way around. If for some reason I have an odd number and I have 1 extra stitch, not worried about that even a little bit. And if I don't, then I don't. I just say that out loud because I know some of you will, have a different stitch count sometimes than what the pattern says because maybe you missed a stitch or you asked an extra stitch or whatever it is. And I just want to give you permission to have an extra stitch or don't have an extra stitch. It's absolutely okay. You don't have to rip out your work. Nobody's ever going to notice. It's going to be just fine. Make sure these are nice and tight as you're going around. Remember, you want to make sure these are still nice and tight as you are knitting from one needle to the next. Let's get all the way around here. And I will, of course, have that extra stitch that I mentioned. Oops. You can see I'm splitting the yarn there. I don't want to do that. And I have this extra stitch, so I can knit it solo or I can knit it together with that. Totally up to you what you want to do. I'm just going to just knit it solo if I can get it to work here. And what I have here is I have very few stitches left. Now, typically when you have a decrease round, you'll do another plain round and then a decrease round. I do not want to do that on the top of the thumb because that'll make the thumb way too long. So I'm just going to do 1 more decrease round, just knitting 2 together all the way around just to really bring it all together. You don't have to do this. You could finish it right here, but I just want to get just a little bit fewer stitches, I think. And if I get there and I decide I don't want that, I'll rip it back out and be like, nope, I want the more stitches, kind of a fatter top of my thumb. But For me, I kind of like a thinner top of the thumb. So I'm just going to pull these together just by knitting two together all the way around. One more time. You can see I'm holding them really, really tight. And it's just going to decrease down the number of stitches I have here at the end of my thumb. So when I pull them all together like a drawstring, it will be nice and neat. All right. I just think that looks a little bit better. So just like we did on the top of the crown, make sure you leave yourself a nice long tail that we can pull through here, because we can use this tail too to close up any holes if we happen to have any. I think we're going to be pretty a-okay with the tail on the other end, but we'll thread it onto our tapestry needle. And just like before, I'm going to go into each stitch as if to knit. I like the way it looks when you go into each one as if to knit. I know some people like to go in as if they're going to purl like that. I like to go in as if to knit and slip it off, as if to knit and slip it off on these final rounds. I just prefer it. I think it looks better. As if to knit, as if to knit. And here is the satisfying part, right? Very satisfying, pulling this all together. It's the top of my thumb right there. Looks good. Looks really good. I typically will go around here like one, just kind of bring it all together just a little bit, just so it doesn't come undone at all. And then I will pop my needle here. There we go. I'm going to pop the needle down the center of my thumb, and we will turn this mitten inside out and weave in any tails that we have. So let's open that up and pop it right on down. You'll see that you are gonna have a fight a little bit with the needle going through a bunch of roving. So that's okay, just pull it through. You can always pull the yarn back through the roving. I'm trying to get my hands all situated there. All right, so there is the top of my thumb. Looks pretty good, looks pretty good. And we're gonna turn this inside out. You can see all of those lovely thrums on the inside makes the mitten very, very soft. You can pop that thumb up here too, make sure it is inside out so that we can weave in all the ends. And as far as all the ends, you have the one at the top of the mitten, the one at the top of the thumb, and the one that started the thumb, leave that alone. We will weave that in on the other side just to close up the hole. And then we have the one down here at the finish. So all I really want you to do is, if you want to use your tapestry needle, or if you have a chenille needle, you just want to get that yarn. This is what I was talking about. It's going to want to get into all of those fibers. Get your yarn and weave it in right here at the top of your mitten. So I do like to use a chenille needle, and a chenille needle is just a very, very sharp, pointy needle that really helps you break through the thread or the fibers of the yarn itself, and it helps you really weave in items. So I'm going to just pull all of these down a little bit. If you remember the top of my mitten, it was kind of poking out a little bit, so those thrums were. So I'm just going to pull them in, give this a little bit of a good weave. I am not letting my needle go through to the right side at all. It's not going through to the right side. I'm just threading it through the fabric here. And because I'm using 100% wool and the fiber is 100% wool for the roving, all of this will just naturally sort of mat together or felt together. I hate using the word matte because it sounds like it's going to be yucky, but it's going to just stay really nice and neat. You don't really have to worry too much about it coming undone. So once you get that all woven in nice and tight like that, just give it a snip. We're going to do the same thing right down here for that thumb, and use my chenille needle here, and you do the same on your end. All right, I tucked in the top and the top of my thumb here. The last thing I have is my tail right here, and I have turned my work right side out So that way I could take a peek and see if I see any hole here that I need to close. And I don't. I think that looks really good. I don't see a hole on the other side either. So I am just going to go ahead and thread this onto my tapestry needle and weave it in over here with the duplicate stitch and call it good. All right, there we go. Look at that mitten. Look how great it looks. And let's do the big test. Put my hand on the inside. Oh, look how great. The thumb is perfect. It is so toasty warm. It fits nicely around my entire mitten, right down onto my wrist. I could make this cuff longer if I wanted to make sure like no snow got in, but I'm not really one that plays in snow too much. I just want warm mittens and they look so good. Oh my gosh, it's so much fun. So much fun. All right, now I got to make a second one and I'm guessing you do too. But how fun is it that we have the first one complete? Hopefully you learned a lot during the process of making this mitten that making the second mitten will not be any trouble at all. The good news is because this mitten really doesn't have a front and a back, you don't have to worry about right hand or left hand. You're going to make the second mitten the exact same way. Have fun, everybody. Make sure you share with me on social media as you finish your mitten. I'm Marley Bird, your By Crafty Bestie. Bye now.
This is all we got. Show me love.